Coming up next, we have my very, very, very special guest, Mr. Kenneth Schalk, ex-drummer of the legendary Candiria, ex-drummer of the equally as legendary Fuel. I know all the Candiria fans and Fuel fans, same people. They love all that shit. No, that level of diversity as a professional musician is pretty incredible. And Ken is an incredible person. Really a musician, a unique musician. He's one of those guys, when you see him play with a band, you immediately start watching him. He has that ability to kind of steal the show, and primarily as a groove drummer. He doesn't actually have to show off to kind of put a spotlight on the extremely high level of artistry. I think he really is an artist in the way he plays, and he expresses his being through his playing. So yeah, I got to see this guy play when I was 16 years old, and it changed my life forever. And then later on down the line, we signed in the same record label, and there was this classic demo, or it wasn't a demo, it was a sampler that Century Media Records put out that had one Candiria song on it and the song Broken Promise from the Determination album. And then, we got to play together in a couple bands out here. So it's amazing to, this show in a lot of ways for me is a way to connect with old friends and ask them questions that maybe I'd be a little too shy to ask them in regular conversation. So this is a pretty long conversation, but even that, me and this guy, we get together, we mix it up, talk about, goblins and space and the Mandela effect. We get, and Jesus and all that stuff. We get pretty deep. This one, we stick mostly to music talk. And actually we recorded it at his drum studio. So it's in a rehearsal space. So you might hear some little sounds in the background every now and again, but I listen to it. I think you can pretty much ignore it for the most part, but yeah, check it out. This is Mr. Ken Schalk. For this show, I've always made notes for every.
I was hoping you'd be prepared like a good journalist.
I didn't, but this time I didn't make notes.
No. Oh, so we're gonna improv this?
No. But here's why.
Which is fine by me.
Here's why I didn't make notes though. I was actually listening to a Bill Simmons podcast today, and he was talking about how he didn't make notes, and then I was like, you know what? For the people I really know, I don't really need notes.
Right.
I understand the arc, and I was like, you know what? This is more of an experiment. So let's see how we're gonna see how it goes. But my
short notice.
But my preparedness was I went to like Candiria Spotify. I just put it on random.
All right.
Just had like certain tracks come up, and then literally it's amazing. Like you start listening to it, and then memories start coming up.
Right.
And you start hearing. You're like, oh, I remember such and such happened, and this happened, and it's
a generation ago at this point.
Well, to me, it's like a whole world ago.
Well, if you go back, like when you look at the way now that I'm officially, and I don't mean me personally, it's meaning like almost like coming a parent and stuff too. It's when you get to a certain age in your life, you officially surpass your past generation of social everything, family, everything that was part of your generational existence from say 15 to 25 starts to then fade into 35, and now that I'm in my 40s, I'm in a whole new generation of existence. I can't even try and be 25 is dumb. Like that's dumb. That's called digression.
Yeah.
Like we have to be able to accept the fact that we are going to mature and progress in our human form. I think what people do miss out on is the youthfulness of curiosity and always knowing that when you wake up in the morning, there's so much still to learn. Treat yourself like a child in that regard.
Yeah.
That you're blessed to learn so much each day as you grow. But that whole trying to like, oh, I'm still, look, I know. I don't deny the fact that I was just watching this 17-year-old kid play drums today, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I can still do that, but the amount of effort and work that I've had to put into my body and my mindset over the last 20-something years to still do it in my 40s, I hope he's thinking that way.
Yeah.
Because he's only 17 now.
Well,
And I see the way he's flailing around, and I'm like, he'll be done by 25 if he doesn't get an idea of what he's doing.
Well, the interesting thing about you is, from a physicality standpoint, you look pretty much the same. You know, the way you play.
Rubbery.
I mean, you were probably a little more like jacked, I guess, back then.
I lost weight, and I've lost weight again. I was up to nice 160, 162. I'm sitting at 154 now.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, you were probably a little more quote unquote jacked, but in terms of physically, you look athletically similar the way you play. Like, you've managed to kind of avoid whatever that, you know, I mean, I guess, are you like just like super health conscious, or?
It's not just health conscious. It's about body efficiency. I mean, that's really all it boils down to, is just making sure that your motions, it's that, you're a Cattle Press fan, right?
Band?
Yeah, you know the band Cattle Press? Eddie Ortiz, Joe Capizio.
I don't think so.
All right,
you
should listen
I
to
need to
their
get on
music
Cattle
and
Press.
go nuts over
I know
them
Cattle
because-
Decapitation.
I know of them as well, yes. But no, Cattle Press was amazing. But anyway, they had a song called Relaxed Until the Moment of Impact. And it's a golf philosophy. It's any kind of full swing philosophy. The moment of impact is where all the energy finally releases. And now you have to create a certain level of tension, obviously, to move and create motion. But we don't want to go past that point where then our efficiency becomes stress.
That makes me think about the Bruce Lee,
It's all Bruce
with
Lee.
the 1-inch punch.
Yes,
You know,
exactly. I actually had to utilize his concept in the song Work in Progress. I teach this thing. I say, and not that all drummers don't get it, but there's this apprehension that drummers have when they try to play rock and they don't see the window. And the window is when you are playing a beat, your hi-hat hand is crossing over your snare drum hand. And a lot of drummers don't realize that when you're playing in a more wristy and looser way, the stick falls back and leaves an open window of space for your snare drum hand to come back more, so that you could lay more efficient power down into the stroke. Now, in this one beat, I was running this hi-hat feel, and I had to keep the snare hand kind of underneath the hi-hat hand for the sake of the groove. So I had to utilize the 2-inch punch concept. And basically, I can't show anybody in an audio podcast.
You guys
but
aren't seeing it. He's doing the motion of the kind of looseness.
Yeah.
Well, that technique that I saw from you, probably the next time I saw a guy that played similar to that was Justin, who was in Blood Has Been Shed, who's now in Killswitch. Like, to me, he seemed...
Justin from Red Tide.
Red Tide. Oh, yeah.
That's how I met Justin, in Red Tide, and
Wow.
we played shows with Red Tide.
Taking it back. Well, I didn't know him when he was in Red Tide, but he kind of just the ergonomic and that wrist technique and the impact and also the kind of the almost compression. Like, think about how you compress a sound, but to have the solidity of hits so that when you're playing slow and you're playing fast, it's even. So to essentially make your sound guy's job really easy.
Exactly.
And you know, so I remember seeing that, and then from the rock perspective, coming out here and getting to see Josh Freeze play live, and also through the Mass Mental gig, which you brought me into, I got to jam with them without you with Brooks.
That's right.
And he had a similar.
Brooks is a very loose player.
technique.
Him and his brother Chad.
I don't know about who.
Chad Wackerman is like, I found out about Brooks through Chad. When I got into Chad Wackerman, Brooks was a little young kid, just starting to get into his teenage years. And he was coming up as a little young drummer. But, you know, and then he got into the rock side of it. But I got into Chad, and they all come from their dad, apparently, who I haven't ever really gotten into. I don't know much about their dad. But there's a Wackerman Senior, apparently, that's brought it all into perspective.
Well, how did you get into playing? Because I feel like in many ways I came into you guys through WSOU, through the whatever their so WSU, for those who don't know, is a radio station in New Jersey. It's Seton Hall, which is a Catholic college,
Locally famous.
Yeah,
Tri-state famous.
and back in the day, before the internet, essentially, because their reach essentially went from central New Jersey all the way to New York. And if you think about that radius, you're talking of tens of millions of people. So you had bands like Slipknot, Disturbed, Linkin Park, and little bands like ours, like God forbid Candiria, that were able to break out in the tri-state area
Totally.
just from that one radio station playing extreme music. So it was really awesome. And they had the death metal show. What was it? Monday Night Mayhem or something like that. I forget what it was called.
They had a lot of really cool programming that they were able to slip in there that made it possible for bands like us to get integrated.
But they were playing songs from Surreal Madness.
Oh my goodness, that's a long time ago.
But it's funny because I perceived you guys as a death metal band.
Wish we were.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when Candiria first started, they were coming from heavy metal roots. And at the time, I was playing with a few different artists. The particular band I was with was like it's kind of like a Chili Peppers, Faith No More-ish style type band going in that range, because this is early 90s, so that was kind of getting hot. And I walked out of a rehearsal and saw their flyer on the wall. They said technical death metal band. Their first few songs were an attempt at
who was
technical.
in the band at this point?
It was Eric, Carly, and Chris Puma, the original guitarist, who's on the first two albums. And they had another drummer named Kenny. And at the time, just a bass player that was kind of playing with them. His name was Matt Holt.
That name sounds really familiar.
It does sound familiar, but it's not. There's actually
another
a Matt
Matt
Holt that has actually risen out of the last few decades. But this is this a long time ago. Dreadlock hippie dude. Excuse me. We got the fat tire up in here, so
that's right. This is the first X-Men where there are beers featured.
Is it really?
I believe so.
Wow. Let's cheers to that.
Usually,
man. That's kind of cool.
Usually it's coffee.
Coffee. Which wouldn't have been bad either.
No, I actually what I did was I kind of did a little performance enhancing cocktail. So I have the caffeine before the conversation,
right?
And then you just have a beer to mellow out. It's okay.
There you go.
It's okay. But this is a friendly beer. Ken is someone I consider to be an old friend, and every now and again we like to have a beer and catch up. So that's
true.
This is
more of a catch up than a podcast. It's been a few months.
Well, no, but me and you are one of those people. We'll have a rehearsal or like a studio session, and then we'll sit and talk about life for 2 hours.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We were hanging deep last time. Yeah,
we get deep. And maybe we'll get deep today. We'll see. But this is deep because I think a lot of times, you're one of those the few people where I was a fan of your band, and then we kind of became peers, and then we started playing together. But when you're a fan of someone, like, that never really goes away. But at the same time, you don't always feel comfortable like interviewing them. Like, so what happened on this album, and what it's a little weird. It kind of dilutes the comfortable nature of things when you feel like someone puts you in another realm.
I think that depends, though, on the. I think that's why, if you look throughout history, why certain people did interviews in the band, and certain people in the band never went near a microphone. For many different reasons. One thing I could say is the one reason to keep me away from the microphone is I could definitely be long-winded. But outside of that, and in an independent experience like this, I'm game for all questions. I appreciate conversation. I think that it's. My goodness, I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what divides us from every other life existence. Every other life existence has to rely upon other forms of minimal communication. We're lucky to have this complex form of communication that if we put the work in through our lives, we could get really good at it. And do it rather easy, efficiently, and get along together. We do. We seem to do pretty good with it.
Well, the thing is with communication is words and also physical, body language is essentially it's symbolism for things we're thinking.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So in a way, all this language is just, hey, I'm trying to get you to read my mind.
In a way, you know, it's almost like with my perspective that everything that I don't look at art as a specific endeavor. I look at it as a way of doing something. So to me, you can be artistic the way you communicate.
Yeah.
You could be an artist of communication. So I think that that's the key, especially in the old days where a publicist or a record label was trying to find their guy to get on the mic. They were looking for the one that could, you know, put the mojo down right.
Well, I think
You don't want to waste time. You don't want to definitely make anyone look foolish or wrong or out of place. You know, it's a strategic arena when you get on that mic because those words get down and then they get out.
Yeah.
And once they're out, they could get twisted in so many ways. I mean, especially these days, it's just ridiculous. You could just misquote anything you want. Well, sample it, drop it in an EDM track, and it's a hit, you know, whatever.
Well, I think a lot of that is just the charisma factor, right? There was this documentary, I think it's on Hulu.
I'm going to make a drop for that. Sample it, drop it in an EDM track. And that's the drop right there.
You let me know. I will email this to you, and you can do that. No, but there's a documentary 8 days a week about the Beatles' touring years. And one thing about them that I noticed, and it's part of the reason why I think they were who they were, was they were so good at the banter and just being charismatic,
yes,
and being personalities.
Yep.
And they were able to like the press would say something kind of disrespectful, and they were able to throw it back at them in a really witty way. They had a very dry, you know, very sarcastic humor.
Big time.
You know, and especially I think that's rare considering how young they were. And,
but they were English.
Yeah.
The English, and this is not a stereotype, this is just the nature of what Americans don't realize about cultures around the world is that they're raised to be much more honest.
Yeah.
Their cordiality, if needed to be compromised, gets compromised into wit and sarcasm, not anger.
Yeah.
It's tougher to anger someone around the world as opposed to an American. I think Americans anger easier than people around the world.
You think it's taking
this is personal experience. I've been around enough for enough segments of the world to experience social culture to see that. I think that it's probably more due to the fact that their cultures are way more seasoned. Our culture right now, just at its best, is at 250 years old about, you know, so we're young. We're a young culture. So we're still what you would consider toddler-esque, you know? We have to get through this whole fuck you.
Well, we're young but prolific.
Wah stage. Well, that's the whole beauty of being young, is that your mind is on fire for knowledge and expression and experimentation. I have children, and I can't, you know, and I'm thankful for the way I was raised. When you allow a child, look, you got to discipline a child when they're out of line. But when a child is starting to reveal the gifts that they have to be able to then have purpose in life, bam, you got to get on that right away. In sometimes a hard way to help them realize that, you're not a little baby anymore. You got to put purpose to this stuff now, but also in a way that's nurturing and encouraging as well, that makes them realize that this is power. This is humble power. This is the ability to be someone that could do great things for other people in the world.
So was your creative freedom nurtured? Is that the beginning of the story?
It was nurtured before I even knew I had to have it nurtured. I was very lucky in the sense that both my parents love music, love art. I was born into a very artistic genetic makeup. It's just a matter of, you know, athleticism too. So that's what made that easy to incorporate into what I do. Not everybody is like that, and there's nothing wrong with that either, you know. Can I do so many other things that so many people are great at? No, I can't, you know. We're all, I believe, you know, it's like it's a puzzle. It's like if you want to be the corner piece, but you're the middle, you know, what are you going to do? Are you really going to like shave your sides off and become this fake corner piece? No, just be the middle piece in the puzzle. It's okay.
So you play like a bunch of instruments, right?
I do.
So
More for necessity. As a songwriter, I was
Yeah.
like, all right, I got to learn this instrument so I know what it, I can understand it.
Well, I remember. So all right, so Candiria for me personally and the band God Forbid was super pivotal in that you guys headlined the first hardcore show we ever went to.
Where was that?
That was at Manville Elks Lodge. I believe it was.
That was when Beyond Reasonable Doubt came out.
I believe so.
Yes.
But I think it was 97.
We were flipping out. We sold like 60 or 70 CDs that day.
It was, yeah, but there was like, what? There was probably like 300 or 400 people or 500, something like that.
It was packed out nice, and it was dude, the energy was great. Jersey was always a great place to play.
Yeah, that was our introduction. I was still in high school.
And we had good SOU promo at that time.
That's the thing is we knew about the show because we met the band For the Love Of, who was direct support for you guys. But because we had, we were already fans of you guys, I was like, oh, Candiria is playing. Like, oh, never seen them.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys didn't have a bass player.
No, not yet.
And so what was behind the decision to say, all right, we don't have a bass player? Because didn't you play bass on the records? Is that
Me and
true?
Eric split the task. Basically going back to the Matt Holt guy.
Yeah.
He was our first bass player, and he made it. Like we basically formed Candiria in February 1992, and by the summer he was gone. And not in a way like, just disappear, or not in a way like this guy sucks. He was actually we used to call him the orange bass player, because we were like this cold death metal band, and he'd be like doo 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 doo, like playing all like Geezer Butler bass lines under death metal. But he was great, and he went off and he went back to music that he's more into, and I don't know where he is now, but he did his thing.
So what is the first actual Candiria release?
Well, he was on that. That was
what is it though?
It's a 2-song cassette demo.
It doesn't have a name?
I don't know if we gave it a name. Yeah, we called it Inverted Kingdom.
Is it anywhere?
I was not a Satanist, but a couple of the other guys in the band were definitely entertaining those realms of entertainment.
In a real way?
They were entertaining
or
those realms of entertainment. There's some
in a real way or
banter.
in a fantasy way?
Well, they took it to a couple of levels where they were like, this is crazy. Like things happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to get into that. That's a deep discussion. That's a podcast for another podcast station. But let's just say that the lyrical content changed after a few years. But, it ran its course. There was definitely a disdain, a bad taste on the tongues of some.
Okay.
For Jesus Cristo, I guess.
I have a difficult time picturing Satanist Carly Coma.
Well, Carly is a converted man now. He's a loyal Christian man, and I always find it interesting that there's something that they say about Christianity, that you can't deny the Holy Ghost, and there's a line, the opening line of Purity Condemned is that exact line, him saying that.
What album is that from?
It's from our Subliminal demo in 1994. And it actually, when we tracked it, the engineer, I don't know if he messed up or we had done a punch or something, but the word I got cut out. So it just says deny the Holy Ghost. So Carly was never able to actually document himself saying it. So in his defense, he's got his Christian path all equaled out for him and everything, but there's no doubt that him and Chris Puma were the two main guys that really were trying to entertain that aspect of Carly. I don't want to expose other people's personal lives, but back then, those two guys, they had this need to experiment with it. I don't know the personal decisions why.
Yeah.
I came into that band like as a startup pothead. I had just started smoking weed.
A startup.
Yeah, I had just started, and I was like, yo, I love weed so much that I don't even need to drink anymore.
Yeah.
Like, cause alcohol, like drinking beer, was like, that stinks. I was
weed...
never a big drinker to begin with, so weed was just like, this is the bomb. because I'm a maniac. I'm insomniac. I'm crazy. So weed was like, hey, whoa, I'm like 2 steps to normal now. You know, this
Yeah.
isn't too bad.
Well, it almost seems like, me.
That could be a band name. 2 steps to normal.
Maybe, I don't know.
I got to put that in my band name list.
I'll think about it. No, but with you, it almost seems like
Emo meets gent.
there's kind of like this spiritual triumvirate between playing drums, weed, and just spirituality.
Golf, too.
And golf. Well, I guess golf is the fourth. Maybe it's a quartet. But I mean, just in relation to seeing you play, like, cause I know you smoke weed, and it seems like it puts you in this place. Like, I remember Corey from God Forbid told a story about you, him, and Chris Penny from Dillinger jamming in a room and smoking a bunch of weed.
Chris Penny never smoked weed.
Well, maybe he didn't smoke weed, but maybe you and
I'm sure me and Corey got down.
did. But he was just talking about how, and I've seen it, getting to play with you now,
which is awesome.
This kind of it is awesome. Of this kind of meditation or I don't know, like you have this, I think, improvisational ability to let go and just kind of be
jumping off the cliff principle.
Be within the instrument and just express yourself in a very clean and clear way.
The more you jump off the cliff, the easier it becomes to fly. It's that simple, bro. Music, you have 2 choices when you're growing up. You could become like a player, or you become a musician. Now, when you get into the musician realms, you dip into 2 subcategories from there.
What's better?
Oh, there is no better. There's exactly what suits you. Dude, some people can't write a song to save their life. Stick $1 million in front of them, stick a gun to their head. They can't write a song. They don't do it.
Yeah.
So they get amazing at their instrument. You tell them what to do, and they do shit that you can't. There's those people. Let them be them,
That's true.
They're in orchestras. They travel the world. They're like session gods.
They're professionals.
Yeah, I mean, those are players, and let them be what they are. That's what they're into. They gravitate to that. But then there's people who actually, then you've got your extreme cases and this is no disrespect to Kurt Cobain right now. I think there's a difference between how people perceive genius. People don't realize. I told this to, I don't know if you know who Gordon Conrad is. He used to work for Relapse Records. He worked for MIA Records when we were signed with him. And we used to joke. I'm a real sarcastic and self-hitting person. I think it's important to be confident, but I think it's important to be equally humble with your confidence. But I used to joke around at the office in MIA and call myself a genius because I would do some graphic design there and stuff. And me and Jack Ball.
MIA was the old record label.
That Process of Self-Development came out on, And I told Gordon once, I was like, listen, bro, that ain't no brag. In order to be a genius, you got to be equally retarded. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's
that ain't no brag.
It's the kind of that dichotomy between that being brilliant at this one thing.
Exactly. When John LaMacchia first joined Candiria, he would get upset at band rehearsals because he didn't realize that he was, eventually he started smoking a little herb too, not much, but when he first came in, he thought Candiria, these guys are technically crazy. They must just rehearse, and he walks in and it's me, Carly, and Eric just hanging out, smoking pot, shooting the shit, taking 45 minutes or so to finally start playing. He was he finally gave in and realized that's the Candiria vibe. We're a chill band, but I think it goes back to the thing I was saying, some people, they really want to get to work and they don't have enough creative, and this is not disrespectful, everybody has a purpose, but people who lack creativity, they excel in methodology and activity, so you got to keep them busy. I look at myself as one of the unfortunate few. To those who are normal, you don't want to be me. I'm both combined. I'm keep me busy all day long, and I'm going into all different worlds trying to create at the same time. So it's a pretty intense mindset to be in, That's why I'm an insomniac and everything else. You know, some nights I'll get 4 to 6 hours sleep, and then other nights like last night, I went to bed at almost 5 and woke up at 6:30. Jumped out and
you
woke
can
up my
survive.
kids. Yeah,
I
because
wish I was like you.
that you see, but this is the thing, bro. And as much as you're not me, I'm not you.
Yeah.
You don't want to have that, because if you try to incorporate that, it would ruin all the beautiful things you're able to do. If I tried to like rest too much, it would ruin me. It would actually drive me crazy. Like it's funny, there's times where I'm like, when my kids were babies and I had to just sit around and kind of watch them at times, like I'd start to like feel it.
Feel what?
The physical tension in my body. I'm a physically active person. If I don't do a certain amount of physical activity every day, I'm like a German Shepherd.
You go crazy.
Yeah, I'll start running around in circles in my head and whatever, being like, yo, I gotta get this out. I'm gonna run around the block or something.
I wonder how many drummers are like that.
Well, here's the thing too. Now, drumming can span a big dynamic range. So, you know, you could be that jazz cafe guy that gets to chill.
Yeah, but guess what? You're still hitting things. Like there's something like there's
But
nothing
it's you can be light enough to be chill.
Well, I guess what I'm saying
and
is that there's
condensed.
something in some people that says I need to hit things. I need to
Oh,
I need to make impact with my body
Absolutely.
in a rhythmic way. I don't have that. There's nothing like I love the air drumming, but there's nothing about me that's like I need to get behind the kit and lay down a groove. Like I'm you see me behind the kit, it is embarrassing. It's not for anybody.
Dude, I've seen so many guitarists get behind the kit, and the first thing they do is they start laughing, even though they're actually doing some good stuff. I'm like, yo, your meter's good. You're throwing down, hey, like a non-basic beat. You're like, you know who was a really great drummer, a little behind-the-scenes drummer? Eric from Candiria. That dude had good pocket. He'd try to do the whole. He'd put the little trickety doo-dah hi-hat stuff in there, and he'd lose his meter at time to time, but he was into it, man. He had deep pocket. You could see the way Eric used to move on stage. He had that deep pocket.
Well, you guys, that was one of the things that was real evident right out the gate, that even though it was the quote unquote hardcore scene, and how you guys ended up in the hardcore scene, I think I don't really know that.
I can tell you that story.
right.
Cauley described it great at a band rehearsal one day, because we were all talking about that, like how we were transitioning on Beyond Reasonable Doubt. We were starting to transition out of the death metal shows, and we had met Ralphie Boy, and Met signed us, you know, Jeff Dees. And all this stuff was happening that was transitioning us into a more hardcore community. And Cauley, we were at band rehearsal, he's like, this is what's happening, bro. And he walks out of the room, and he opens the door, and he like peeks his head in, and he's like, yo, is this the hardcore room? Yo, what's up? We're Candiria. We're gonna sneak in here. Because that's kind of what happened. Like, we all love groove and everything. Like, I think the initial concepts of Candiria were, what's a good way of putting it? I guess premature in the sense, because I don't think all 5 of us knew what we all really loved together. You know, I think there was more of this intent to be a technical death metal band in its initial stage, but as we all got to know each other and get to appreciate each other's musical tastes and diversity, we were like, excuse me, we were all like, interesting. And the song structures changed. If you listen to Subliminal still has a real heavy death metal sound to it, but the technicality and strangeness and experimentation is starting to work its way in more. That's our 4-song demo in 1994.
Is any of this stuff available, like stuff like that? Is that like in the like?
Somebody put Subliminal on YouTube, which is awesome. So if you want to check it out on YouTube, Candiria Subliminal, it's a 4-song demo. I don't know if the instrumental is there, which would make it 5 songs. But I have it somewhere. I could even pop it up somewhere.
So
too.
the one thing I think I could say, and anyone who's on the outside looking in could say, and I think this is something amazing about you guys, is that Candiria was truly an original sounding band. There was nothing, I can't point to something that happened before that sounded like that, and maybe there's some, you know.
We thought we were better than Fear Factory, but to be honest with you, and this is no disrespect back at our own band, Candiria, the problem with Candiria, and we even sensed it even when we were on MIA, and we thought that Mathematics was a radio song. And we, you know, it's just, we started to slowly realize, and even Mike Barilli, our longtime producer on all those early albums, said it. He goes, listen, you guys, just quickly back to Fear Factory. Fear Factory was doing an innovative thing in 1993, 1994.
Of course,
but they were doing it with a format so that people could latch on to it. So now back to Mike Barilli's comment. He goes, you're like the scientist who invented the really awesome thing that everyone likes, but then you went to try and explain it in your scientific way to people, and they all didn't like it anymore.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have that guy to explain it in the simple way.
Well, I think one of the main elements, you know, and I think...
that was a big, profound wake-up call to me, to be quite honest. I wouldn't say that's what changed Candiria's sound, that comment, but I think overall there was always this subconscious underlying thought. I mean, just to hit on the fact that, like, one of the misconceptions of a lot of fans is that, Carly's singing was some kind of fearful endeavor or maybe some kind of, like, commercial sellout. And not to get too Maynardy, but I've always believed what Maynard believes. If you want to make art for yourself, make art for yourself. As soon as you want somebody else to hear your shit, you're selling it out.
Yeah.
You're making someone else give an opinion of it. That means you're not really considering it your art anymore. You're considering it a source of entertainment or possibly even healing. See, Carly and I were lucky enough to sit in our van and be told by an actual human being that we saved their lives, that our band with a couple of others helped him from actually committing suicide. Mm-hmm. When you're told that, your perspective of what music means is totally different then. And I'm not crying now, but there's times I talk about this story where I do cry because it's so profound. You saved someone's life through what you did. That's intense.
Yeah, and
there's nothing, I think, more rewarding than that, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and I've heard stories like that, and I think any of us are lucky to be in a band that had a certain amount of impact. You know, you hear those stories. For me, it's very difficult to actually. I can hear the words and hear the story. It's very difficult for me to actually understand because, you know, it'll probably happen to you, but you'll run into someone and they'll tell you how much what you did means to them. And it's like, I feel it in the moment, but I have a difficult time actually fully empathizing, I guess, with it because, I don't know, it's almost like you don't want that responsibility.
Well, that's what happened to me, you know. One of the things I realized, like, you know, off the mic before when we were starting to get into this discussion about where we lie as musicians in the social media realm. And I remember when Candiria had our forum, what made that forum amazing was the fact that it was a society of people with a general likeness. Not just Candiria. Candiria was the main likeness that brought us to the forum, but then it became music, art, and fashion, cooking, everything. You know, all that we see now in social media platforms was existing in this forum. So I look at my life on social media now as like an expansion of what that Candiria forum was like back then.
Yeah.
It's an ability and an opportunity. It's the ability is the technical ability to be online and have this connectivity, but the opportunity is there for us as human beings to connect on a human level. It doesn't matter that, you know, you play guitar and I play drums. What matters is that you and I are human beings who have an existence and a daily type of routine mixed with a daily type of spontaneous, unpredictable flow of events. And every human being has that. Mm-hmm. We have that wake-up call in the morning that says, these are the things I want to do. And then we have that other wake-up call that happens all throughout the day. We get many of those wake-up calls, which is, this wasn't supposed to happen wake-up call.
Yeah.
And we have to wake up. We got to react. And I think when we live our life in a way that's able to respond to these things more appropriately and more efficiently as artists, then we can apply that into our music and be more efficient. more appropriate.
Well, one of the interesting things I think about those early, because to me, I think there's definitively chapters of that band.
It's
And
Candiria is a life band.
Yeah.
That's in the early days. What's your influence? Life.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at. You
Well,
know?
no,
It's like,
but
it's
I,
a big thing for
but I'm
us.
saying, but if you look at the, to me, the early days before, probably even before, like you guys signed with Central Media and that whole realm, when you were more, I guess, perceived as a East Coast, Northeast, New York. Like to me, if you look about what you guys did, and it was, you had death metal in there, you had hardcore, you had this groove thing, you had hip hop, you had jazz. To me, it embodied what New York was about
Urban fusion.
at the time. Yeah.
That's what we came up with. Urban fusion. That's stuff you can only make music like that when you're in a place that all that stuff is melting into you.
Do you think so? I had this idea, or maybe it's just something I noticed about a lot of the bands that came out of that area, and I think whether it's Anthrax, whether it's Life of Agony,
Okay.
whether it's Biohazard, whether it's E-Town Concrete, whether it's God Forbid, there was this groove thing that existed within the heavy bands around that. And sometimes it translated globally or nationally, but sometimes some of those bands I felt like it didn't translate. People didn't quite get it outside of that area. I look at a band like E-Town Concrete that was huge in New Jersey, New York, and Philly, and they went around the country, and I'm sure they had some success, but it didn't necessarily translate. Like
It was too East Coast.
Yeah, but even I think Candiria, there was something where, was it too much of the space and that lifestyle and that thing?
I think the only thing that gave Candiria only got nationally, internationally a few notches up. I think more because I think there was a lot. Candiria was a very strange band. In terms of its business timeline, I think we, I could only speak, off my own tongue here, and this is my own opinion of our business timeline. I think we made a lot of very foolish decisions. I don't think to use the word bad means, now you're looking into the realms of stupid, which means you already knew what was right and you chose.
Yeah, it's ignorance.
Right.
You can't. Ignorance is no one's
There
fault.
was a combination of ignorance and not enough knowledge. So it's foolishness and ignorance combined in a lot of our decisions.
But what young band doesn't have a series of
but then there were some
decisions?
Then I think there were some decisions that, even though I would still put them in the realms of foolishness, man, I don't know. Looking back, I'm like, I think maybe we should have had a little more of an open eye towards that moment right there.
Yeah.
I don't think we had to be like that. But then again, this is my future self saying that. So learn and learn and learn as you go. I think that's what's I think that's what can be damaging to people in life if they're not careful, is that they'll evaluate their life against what was supposed to be, as opposed to valuing their life over what really has happened.
Supposed to means nothing to me.
Exactly. I mean, look,
it's like an alternate reality.
There is nothing to complain about on the Candiria timeline. I mean, whether or not certain decisions may have yielded shorter spurts of success or shorter spurts of certain areas, like, for example, 1 year on Century Media could have potentially been more, but just the decisions we made led us away from them. Can I deny that year on Century Media was amazing? Never. I could never deny it. To be honest, my favorite time in Candiria was touring with the Century Media team. They were so supportive of us.
Yeah.
They believed in us. They pushed us out there. They kept us busy with our booking agent, and they supported us through these tours. And at the time when we jumped to move to another opportunity, I'm not saying that opportunity was bad in its initial state, but In hindsight, it's like, man, if we would have ran another 2, 3 albums with Century Media, who knows. But who wants to sit here and do that? Oh, what could have been? Look, we got rammed over by that's an 18-wheeler.
Yeah,
so
but
that takes a whole other change.
But what is interesting to me, I think about sometimes doing those thought experiments is not necessarily woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Right.
But I'm like, what fascinates me is,
I like that thought experiment.
listen, a lot of this stuff is just thought experiments because, like I said, we cannot go back and change the past. But what we can do is reflect on it.
Absolutely.
And there's insights that I wasn't there for, so that's why you're here, so I can ask you.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I remember seeing you guys. You were on tour with 40 Below Summer.
That was when we crashed.
Exactly, right? So I saw the show at Birch Hill, and it might have been the best I've ever seen you guys.
We were primed right then. Yeah, we were pretty primed.
And was there some, I think, a sense, or I'm asking you, was there a sense of the trajectory, like pre-accident, that the band was in a certain way? Like, did you feel, like, what was the level of confidence or kind of...
Dude, I could sit here, right? I could literally, if I was a different person, be a really cold-hearted, resentful prick.
Of course.
Because of where the level of tightness, readiness, and professionalism that band was at that point. Like I said, we had all of 2001 running that Century Media game. They kept us nice and busy. We were running it. And we did that following through into early 2002. And then we did that sign-on with Lakeshore, and we did our own headlining tour over the summer of 2002, which blew my mind, dude, because, I'm a perspective guy, I find simple logics and then find joy out of how that logic plays out. If it plays out to the positive side, you have no right to find resentment or anger.
How did that tour go?
It was amazing as far as I'm concerned, because when I looked at SoundScan figures and compared them to the audience numbers, I was like, I can't believe this many people turned out. This is amazing.
Yeah.
We were pulling, if you do the whole tour average back then, that summer headline tour probably would have averaged between 200 and 400 a night.
That's good.
And I'm not saying we didn't have nights less. For example, like our SoundScan numbers in New Orleans was like 20 or 30. But there was almost 150, 175 people at the show.
Yeah.
So it was like, when I see things like that, and not that I'm like some kind of like super brain head like type of numbers guy, but I think there's certain stats you can use to create good mental perspective.
Yeah, well,
if you get out on stage, for example, and you see 130 people, right? And you say to yourself, man, there's nobody here.
No, there's not. There's 130 people.
Right. But if you say, well, how many records have we sold in this city for the album we're out to support, and it says 20 to 30, and you're like, wait a second. So there's more people here than the city has sold albums. So that has a lot to say about really what's happening. And I think a lot of what commercial music doesn't realize in the underground levels of music is that street is everything. Commercial numbers, what I find about commercial numbers is that they create a good gauge for how much more the street is involved in your scene.
Yeah, but I listen, I think certain numbers mean certain things, and they mean different things for different artists.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we were dealing with, and we were kind of in a similar boat, but not the same boat as you guys, in that we were coming from this DIY hardcore scene
but
thing.
You guys were smart. You stayed on Century Media. You let them develop and you guys got to a really good point. You guys got ahead of Candiria. I mean, we had the accident which blew us out, but you were smart. I think one thing that Candiria made a foolish decision on is that, and again, I'm speaking from my own self, but in hindsight, that thought of like the multi-album deal at that time actually would have been a smart decision. That label would have put a lot into us over the course of 5-6 years.
That was the best time to get on the label. By
2006, 2007, Candiria would have been a heavy metal household name through Century Media. That was, I believe that was our biggest foolish decision,
Well,
was leaving Century Media.
In a lot of ways, you guys were using the leverage of the fact that you had kind of built a career already, and you were in that position where you could negotiate a 1-record deal. We weren't. We signed a 3-record deal.
They wanted us to really settle with them
Yeah.
and do more, because we jumped in on them at a time.
That was Steve Joe, right?
Yeah, and we were not like, and this is no disrespect to God forbid, but you guys, your sound and writing was way more applicable to the Century Media sound than Candiria. So without realizing it, that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, that with this thought experiment, if you will, going on, I look back and I'm like, this was a label that was trying to take a standout band and put an investment into.
Yeah.
And we didn't see that. And I think,
or did you just take it for granted?
No, we didn't see it, because we got blindsided by that Lakeshore deal, and we saw...
It was just a lot of money?
It wasn't just money. It was the opportunity to start our own imprint.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you were...
Which was a goal of ours.
Yeah, you were thinking in an entrepreneurial fashion.
Yeah, which was great, but then again, you never want to open a business prematurely, and I think that, it's good to start a business with a better reputation. So in essence, I think it was a premature decision. Good idea, decided upon a little too early.
Yeah.
We got a little excited in our boots.
Well, I'll give you a couple of my theories. All right. I think the one theory is the being too early theory, that progressive music, progressive heavy music, took foothold in a way that became profitable probably about 6 to 8 years after kind of the peak of Candiria. And I think if you look at think about it. When we were coming up, you guys were coming up, Meshuggah was like this thing that only a certain people knew, and it was very niche, and it was, bands like that, it was not really considered a career move. It was more this artistic endeavors, and I think
interesting.
All I'm saying is that to me there were 3 bands. It was Meshuggah, you guys, and Dillinger, who were kind of ushering in this new wave of heavy music that was coming from a different angle. It had great musicianship. It was angular. It was weird. It was bringing in, like you guys were probably the band that had most jazz influence, but I'd say those other bands had more like fusion influence, or just like I said, that progressive thing going on. Whereas now you look at a band like Animals as Leaders, and that band is playing theaters and selling a lot of records.
Yeah.
I think if Animals as Leaders came out in 2001, I don't know if they have an extended career or something that is considered commercially, salient in the way it is now.
Well, if I could just say one thing, though, that the earlier music, well, not so much Dillinger or Meshuggah, but I would say, and, look, I'm talking about my own band, Candiria, but I think one thing Candiria didn't have then that they would need now is an on top of it rhythmic experience. One thing about where progressive, like you mentioned Animals as Leaders, and I'm not saying that I can't point out specific bands, but there's no denying that Animals as Leaders is pulling from a lot of the aggressiveness of the emo and the melodic metal, like Darkest Hours and stuff. They're pushing that aggression. They're driving music more. Candiria was a very laid back band.
Yeah.
And music now drives.
It's that East Coast groove.
It could be technical. Yeah, it is. It's got a hip hop value to it. That's the thing about Candiria. It's hip hop-ish, but it's street, it's urban, it's halftime, it's groove time.
Have you heard of this band Fire
but
from the Gods?
Music today ain't like that, dude. The last year I've been working harder more to bring up blast beats and get more aggressive playing.
Hold on a second. I'll ask you.
Need it.
I'm gonna cut you off real quick. Have you heard the band Fire from the Gods?
No.
So it's this new band, and they're on Rise Records, and they have this track that blew up.
Okay.
And it's very reminiscent of What Doesn't Kill You era Candiria to me.
Which is still a very diverse album.
No,
What
no, I
song do
know.
you think maybe from that album are you?
It's not even just one song. It's just a vibe, a vocal tone.
Yeah.
They're vocally. They have a black singer too. So black people just sound like black people. I don't know what to tell you guys, but
I'm not gonna argue.
it's
with
true.
that.
But anyway, but I think it's just evidence of that. But the other point, besides the progressive thing of being a little too early, the other thing I think is pre and post accident. The biggest difference is that in a lot of ways, the older Candiria songs were like structured in chapters, and it was like, here's this section of the song, and then here's this section of the song. It really moved in this kind of linear exploratory way.
Yeah, journeys.
Whereas What Doesn't Kill You, which was obviously a big departure, you guys kind of became a quote unquote song band or a traditional song band. I don't know.
But again, not in the sense of like forcing it. Again, going.
Well, I'm
back,
not talking about the process. I'm just talking about the end product. And the thing is, and I think that's happened. Like, for example, Lamb of God. If you look like the Ashes of the Wake.
Mastodon too.
Yeah, like bands, but even Mastodon, what was their big song? Like that song, their first like kind of big hit was still structured in a way that would be considered a normal song. But what I'm saying is that I don't think that helped
It's
you guys.
all about Braun. I was just watching a Braun video the other day.
Oh, he's fucking amazing.
Dude, I was able to befriend Braun when it was us, Neurosis, and he was playing in Today's the Day.
Oh wow!
And
that was a tour.
Yeah.
Wow, that's sick.
Oh, dude, it was amazing. And watching him was great. I mean, he's always been a fury on the drums, but he's a player around his kid. And this video is so awesome because it's a Mastodon documentary, but it's focusing on him, and he's talking about the way he didn't mind, in a way, simplifying certain aspects of his playing to focus more on the song as well, and I think that's always something that even with Candiria too, it's like, even as complex as maybe we tried to make things, the focus was always on how do we make this resolvable for people to be able to groove to it.
Yeah.
So I think even though 300, even though What Doesn't Kill You, or even Kiss the Lie at that, showed more signs of structure and format, it didn't change the underlying cause from day one, that no matter how complex you get, people have choices in that matter as well. Some complex songwriters like to keep the listener messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Other complex songwriters still want to resolve in a way that allows you to enjoy the experience. And that was always something big on us. We can disguise the one, we can flip it all over the place, but we had to create pathways that got to a point where it would resolve too, and eventually get people to a place where they could be a part of the song again, and not feel like the meandering left them just meandered, but actually got them back again, Yeah.
Well, I think so that record, What Doesn't Kill You, in a lot of ways, I think is a really high point for the band.
Yeah, I like that album.
I think it's my favorite. Just I think it's the most well produced album.
Ben Death did a great job on it,
and like I said, it was such a departure, but in a way that it was like, wow, I think some new and exciting things might happen for this band in a way that maybe weren't possible because of, like I said, I think there was just a density, no pun intended.
Well,
there was an intellectualism and a certain, just kind of, in many ways, because you look at just jazz in general, it is thought about as this kind of hoity-toity smart guy in a jacket with those little patches, those suede patches on the elbows,
smoking jacket.
Yeah, I think there was that element of needing a certain level of complexity as a listener. That album was just a little more palatable. But what was the situation where you guys did that? You did some touring. And then Kiss Alive seemed to kind of come out with very little fanfare, and then things kind of seemed to
Oh,
dissolve.
dude, yeah, I know. It was tough because, what doesn't kill you was the basic attempt, like anybody else, to come back from a downtime. In this case, it was a downtime from an accident, though. So it wasn't a matter of people just getting their mental head together. It was a matter of people battling physical ailment.
Did Eric
Eric had to bounce eventually.
Did he contribute to the writing of that, though?
What doesn't kill you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he did.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
He just couldn't really do the touring aspect.
Well, we started touring. Our last great tour, if you will, as Candiria, was 2004 over the summer with Kitty and 36
yeah.
Crazy Fists. And, we had an amazing tour, which that wound up getting cut short a little bit because the Kitty camp had to bail out a little early, too. We never made it out to the West Coast. But long story short, once that summer was over, Eric got himself back home. We did some touring with Shadows Fall, and he started feeling it bad in his back and stuff.
Just going to cut into our conversation with Ken Schalk real quick to talk about a Jabberjaw media show called The Future of What. We all listen to music, but what's happening behind the scenes can be a mystery, even for insiders. Get a look into the recording industry with the Future of What podcast. Each week, host and Kill Rock Stars president Portia Sabin delves into a topic of interest to music industry professionals and fans alike by discussing important issues with great people who work every day to help artists succeed. Upcoming episodes include conversations with Open Mike Eagle, Top Shelf Records, and a peek at how songs make it onto hit shows like Atlanta. Find The Future of What online at killrockstars.com/The Future of What or on your favorite podcast app. Now back to our conversation with Ken Schalk.
So we're going to Joe Rogan this. We're going to bring on, some crazy topics. We're going into the crazy land, or are we just going to stay on music?
We might. It depends how much time you have, but there's some things I still want to know because, I want to know personally about, so I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, that things kind of wound down with Candiria kind of naturally based on the interest or maybe the financials, or am I wrong on that, or is it other things that, because the band never officially broke up?
This is the thing about, I said this once, I said, I don't know how I worded it, but said this many, many years ago, that whether Candiria remains a touring band or not, they'll always be the entity of it, and the musicians, as long as they're around, will always have the potential to have an opportunity to keep making music. I think one thing that I learned over the last couple of years through the latest Candiria incarnation is that Candiria really is a New York band.
Yeah.
And one thing I learned about the way that works. Now, and I don't mean New York in a specific sense, just in a sense that, look, when you're a band, you're a band. You live in a certain place, and you all live there, and you work together, and you live together, and you all live and breathe that city together. It's interesting because after the last few years working with Joe Holmes and Rob Trujillo, coming post out of that Pharmacos project, now Joe Holmes is he's still working on music, and we're constantly,
Wow, this is Joe Holmes, who used to be in Ozzy.
Yeah.
That's what Ken does now. He plays with all the motherfuckers.
Well, you played with Trujillo with me, so that was fun.
Well, through you. Actually, I'll tell the story real quick. When I first...
Hey, I didn't know Trujillo till MacGyver, though, because the bass players had to unite first. So it was Mike MacGyver and Trujillo, and then through Mike, then, we...
That's Rob Trujillo from a little band called Metallica. Just to let you guys know. I'm going to do some humble bragging.
Rob Trujillo from Suicidal Tendencies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when I first moved to LA...
Infectious Grooves.
This was summer 2014. We were jamming for our cover band, Rebel Noise Group.
That's right.
Which hopefully we can do a gig soon.
Please. That's some fun stuff.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it again.
Go down to Slide Bar. OC likes it.
Let's do it. But I had just moved here. We were jamming for this cover band. And then Ken asked me, hey, would you be down to do some Sabbath songs with this band Mass Mental with Rob Trujillo? And luckily,
Not just Rob Gio, but for all you metalheads that don't know any other sides of bass playing, Aman Saba Lecho is an amazing African bass player.
That's right. Cameroon. He's from Cameroon.
Cameroon.
And then also the full band is actually Benji Webb from Skindred.
Mm-hmm.
And then the original drummer is Brooks Wackerman, who's now in Avenged Sevenfold. And then we got the DJ C-. All right.
C-.
So
there he is.
We also had the DJ C- who played with Korn, and then
Whit Crane on vocals doing the Sabbath tunes.
Yeah, and then so there's kind of like the extended family of Mass Mental with Whitfield Crane, who's from Ugly Kid Joe and Life of Agony, and then there's another guitar player who's a badass, and I kind of, I'm just like the backup, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm like the 12th man on the bench.
You handle that though.
When someone, I'm Jeremy Lin coming off the bench, to get 25 in the fourth quarter. But that was the first gig I did out here, and that was all because of Kenny, and because I had toured with Metallica with Lamb of God, so at least he knew who I was and that I actually could play a guitar.
That's true. That's true.
So that was helpful. But yeah, so Kenny's doing all shit like that now. But I want to go before this. So Candiria is winding down.
Yeah.
And then you decide to move to California. Is this before or after you started playing? Actually, here's the story I want to ask about. Didn't you play with the Misfits?
Dude, that was amazing.
How did you end up playing with the Misfits?
So in 2000, we were touring with VOD. And their sound man / tour manager was Dylan McLaren. Now, Dylan McLaren, I don't know if at the time whether he was working with Misfits, but he wound up doing some soundman work for the Misfits. Obviously, I think he's a brother, Kenny, one of the only relatives. So weird saying only. Such a weird last name. But Doyle and Jerry's, it was either another brother or a cousin. His name is Kenny. Same name as me. He was the actual tour manager. But Dylan was the sound man for the Misfits tour in 2000. So, obviously, the Misfits were going through some strange things, and Chud walked off after the Tampa Bay show, and Dylan called me and was like, bro, it's Halloween weekend. The Misfits cannot fail on Halloween weekend, and I know you're a killer drummer, bro. So he hired me for the weekend to come down. And
this was 2001, or this was years later?
This is 2000. It was the end of October.
It was long ago?
It was the end of October 2000. I went down to Florida, met them. I literally had to get off the phone. I went to the city. I went to Tower Records and HMV. I went to both of them, and I picked up all the Misfits CDs I know. Because, first of all, this is no disrespect to the Misfits. I had a really good friend growing up in the metalhead community. His name is Cliff. And he crossed over to the more hardcore punk stuff. So he was always my little my go-to resource for at least knowing what that stuff was like. But I mean, look, I was into progressive metal and stuff. So it's not that I hated the Misfits. I just had no interest in getting down with them.
I've never owned a Misfits album. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
And I don't dislike them.
But you know what? Look, I don't deny the fact that all heavy and rock and punk and any kind of good music is good for me. I'm a drummer. We're a little more easier in that realm. We don't have to connect ourselves as emotionally to melodies and lyric. We can, but ultimately we're playing beats. So if the beats are great, we'll play the gig, So anyway, I go out, I buy the albums I need to get this set list going, and I start falling in love with them. I'm like, man, this band is amazing,
Great songwriters.
Oh my goodness, the songs are awesome. So I'm just like, that's my headspace, just so people could get a perspective, a CD Walkman. Not even.
Oh, no, a Discman.
Well, I was going to say a CD Walkman. Not. This was a cassette Walkman.
Oh, you did have a cassette
I was rocking the
Walkman.
cassette Walkman. I wasn't into the CD Walkman. The reason why is because you couldn't really burn CDs yet. I know everybody thinks, and now nobody even wants to burn CDs. Now it's flash drive, download it, upload it, whatever.
It's in the cloud, baby.
But at this point, we weren't at a point where you can burn CDs so easily. So tapes were still a pretty good available source for making 90 minutes of music, So basically, I drop down my set list onto cassette. I hop on a plane. I go down to Florida. I meet them. Then from there, we drive to the airport and we hop on a plane to L.A. And I play the Blood Drive Festival out here. That was my first show. We basically
How many
flew to
shows
L.A.
did you do?
I did 4. We flew to L.A. We jump in a rehearsal studio out here. I don't even know where we were. We run through like 15, 16 songs, run out to the place. I think it was in Corona or Pomona. Run the festival, 15, 16 songs, get out of there, jump on a plane back to the East Coast, and then we do Atlanta Masquerade. We do what is it, State Theater in Memphis, right?
No, State Theater's in Tampa.
Yeah, sorry. What's the one in Memphis? That one right there off the highway.
I probably played there, but I don't remember.
Yeah,
the name of
and
it.
then we go to New Orleans and do the Halloween show
At the House of Blues.
at the House of Blues, baby.
Right on.
Yeah.
So I didn't. For some reason,
So
I thought that was way
I got to
later.
jump into the greatest weekend of the Misfits touring cycle. I
Yeah.
got to do the ultimate weekend on the Misfits. So it wasn't just going out and playing with the Misfits. I got to wear makeup and like be like a monster.
Do you have
for a night.
pictures?
I don't know. I didn't do makeup for the other shows. Just on the Halloween show in New Orleans. They were all like, they sat me down. They were like, "Come on, man." They're like, "We can't force you, but please, come on. We got an aesthetic guy coming. He's gonna do everybody's faces all nice." I was like, "All right," and that's when they named me Renfield and everything. They gave me a name.
Renfield. That's
Renfield.
what
Was that the guy from Frankenstein or whatever?
I believe
Dracula,
so.
right?
The little
Yeah.
hunchback.
Uh-huh.
So now, so I thought that was much later. So now we're gonna
No, that's
fast forward.
2000.
So you also played in the band Fuel.
Fuel was an awesome run. That was an
Now,
awesome run.
how the hell were you already on the West Coast? Were you already out of?
Yeah, I was already here. Basically, a good friend of mine, Eddie Wool, music producer.
Yeah, I know Eddie. He had the Scrap 60.
Yeah,
with
exactly with Rob.
Caggiano.
Exactly. Yeah. So being out here, he's out here as well. So we made connections together, and he actually hired me to do Jada Pinkett's song. I was doing a new Wicked Wisdom song with them. She wound up getting Pridgeon to do the video with her,
Yeah.
and retrack
But
it.
you actually wrote
No,
it?
I think he retracked it too.
Okay.
Like she got a whole new band to retrack it. Pridgeon played drums on it, but I did the original with Pocket and actually it was Rio was playing bass at the time. So it was us
I just
three.
smoked a Pocket.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
in San Fran.
Man, that dude smoked me out all day. I didn't think I'd have it for the dub. There's this massive double bass part at the end of the track. And Caggiano at the end, he was like, "No, you got to run this." And I pulled the shit out of my ass to fucking knock that out. But, it was one of those things where it was a great experience hanging with Pocket in Rio for the day. And we just banged out the song. It sounded great. Eddie produced it like a champ. And that was at least my West Coast kind of lock-in with Eddie. And then he started working with Brett from Fuel. Brett wasn't in Fuel anymore, but he started working on some stuff with Sean. You know Sean? I forgot his last name. From the band Smile Empty Soul.
I know the band, but
okay.
I don't know him personally.
So they were working on a little side project that they were actually going to make this the new Jada Pinkett album, but they wound up calling it World Fire Brigade. And I tracked the drums for that. And from that, like about a year after that, Brett was like, "You know what? I'm gonna put Fuel back together," and he did. And he asked me to come out with him and do it.
So how long did you play with Fuel?
So we did 2000. We did 2 weeks on the East Coast in 2009, and then all of 2010, 2011, and 2012 we toured for 3 years. Wrote a record. Tracked the record in 2000, early 2013, I think, or maybe 2012, and then toured all the way through 12. They finally got the record done and out in like 14, I think. At that point, they had a new drummer. So, but yeah, it was an awesome 3 years to tour with those guys. Brad Stewart was on bass. First was Yogi Lonich, and then Jason O'Neill from what's the band's name? That Florida band that Brad and Jason were in. Come on, name me a Jacksonville band. Not Limp
Jackson.
Bizkit.
Oh, Creed.
No.
Leonard Skinner.
Yeah, the classic. Oh my goodness. I can't believe I can't get their name right now. Shoot. Anyway, and then after that, Andy Anderson, who's a good friend of mine and he was great. He's such a great guitarist, Andy.
So, in many ways, I felt like coming out of the hardcore scene, you guys just seemed to be almost overqualified. Like there was a level of,
I wouldn't say overqualified.
Here's what I
Inappropriate.
Here's what I mean by that. I mean the hardcore scene was not known for having professional level musicians. As far as I was concerned,
In the general sense of the hardcore scene, it was about solid hardcore playing.
It was more about the
but
community.
You can't. Do you know who Kiss the Sky is?
Yeah.
Coalesce, Converge. There were bands that were. Yeah, I'm not trying to be. I'm not condescending upon you right now.
No.
But you know what I'm saying? Like,
listen,
can you call that hardcore though? That's what I'm saying. Were we really hardcore? We were using hardcore as an influence, but we weren't hardcore.
I'm not using the term in terms of musical genre. I'm using.
We could get a pit going.
I'm
though.
using it in
shit.
terms of the scene in which we were surrounded, the like-minded bands,
okay.
the peers, the group of bands. The only reason hold on.
Okay, sorry.
The reason why I'm making that point is just to say that in many ways, if I were you guys, you know how you said before, you're like, oh, we thought we were better than Fear Factory.
No. I thought we were doing something more innovative.
Original. Okay.
But we weren't really. Actually, we weren't doing what we were supposed to do, which is serving the audience.
All right. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is to say that in many ways, I could see you guys looking around, and even though everything that I associated with Candiria was 100% artistry and expression and pure and all that, it's like I was surprised that someone like Ken Schalk would play in a band like Fuel, but in many ways it was like, of course he would play in a band like Fuel because you're of that caliber as a musician that you're exactly the type of person to me that should be getting high name, well-paying professional gigs. And to me, I don't think you can say that for much of the talent level, just purely on a musician, or as you say, a player, right? Because there's the musician and there's the player. From just being a player, being able to step in and do that stuff. So it was kind of this thing that functioned for me on one level, but it was also like, oh, that's interesting. Whereas like, did something in your mentality about understanding, hey, I have the skill set, and if I don't utilize this as a profession, as a professional to, make a living or exert myself in this way, that I'm kind of wasting my ability.
It's interesting in the, going back to the social media thing, a lot of the interaction that took place in that 2010 touring cycle was the transition of a lot of the Candiria friends and fans getting to familiarize the fact that I'm playing in Fuel now. And a lot of the questions were all based around that. How can you play in Fuel after playing in Candiria? And my response was, whether the words changed a little here and there, the intent of the response was always the same. It's pretty much the same experience. It's actually even better now for me. One of the things that made Candiria an amazing experience is that it was a dynamic experience. I'm a dynamic player, so even though Candiria for the most part was a hard driving, high energy, heavy metal show, there was a lot of dynamic within it. But it also a lot of diversity.
But it also, I think,
a lot of complexity. As long as there's multiple elements involved in the night, you could get me on stage. Believe it or not, now here's the thing. If you're going to stick me on stage and make me play the same song over and over again, I'm going to get really bored. That's what made the Misfits gig amazing. Like, that's a one diverse band. It's not just a trashy punk band. I mean, these dudes were like 1950s doo-wop in late 70s punk rock fashion. So, it's real songs. It was fun to play that. And the same thing with Fuel. It was like, I would play a song like Empty Spaces, which could be the dynamic equivalent of playing a Candiria song. Yet I do a song like, well, we would have this moment in the set at times where we do an acoustic little run, and we do like 3 songs in a row with acoustic guitar. So I'm forced to pull out lighter drumsticks and play a little lighter. A song like Bad Day is like it's kind of ballady type of song. So you got Bad Day compared to Empty Spaces, compared to Last Time, compared to even Hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is a mix of like, really laying out a heavy, driving, hard, slow beat, and I'm not playing at all. So it's a wonderful experience. I think a lot of people don't realize, like, I'll use, like, the other night I was watching some Earth, Wind, and Fire footage, and it was a Sonny Emery. He's the drummer at the time, and he's the drum solo. He's going for it. And I'm like, there's nobody on stage. What do you think they're doing right now? At least 2 or 4 of them are out taking a piss. Maybe somebody's even taking a shit right now. Somebody's trying to get laid real quick. Somebody's having a drink. Somebody's just taking a breath and catching their breath because somebody's drinking some water because they sang a lot and they're maybe not so well that night. That drum solo is a lot more than just that drummer drumming. That's a moment for a lot more other people. One thing I learned in the difference between being on tour with a support band like Candiria and being on a headlining band that does a full set is it's like, hey, it's not important to be playing or doing something all the time. This is a show where everybody in the band is kind of going to have their moment. They're going to have a moment to relax as well and pull away and not be seen even. I like that about, there was a point in every Fuel show, at least 2 or 3 times, where I'd jump off the riser and hang out with my drum tech and have a beer or take a hit from the bowl and be away from the audience. Not because I don't love the audience, but because I would be in the way. It's a show, and if Brett is in the front of the stage talking, people don't need me like just sitting around behind a drum set, just sitting there doing nothing. That's dumb. Get off the fucking drum riser and be invisible. Let the man in the front be seen. I've done gigs with people even locally at the Viper Room where I'm like, yo, I'll wear all black to make sure you stand out.
To play the role.
I'm still going to beat the shit out of the drums, and people are going to want to know what that octopus thing behind the drums is, but at least I'll be in black so I won't be seen so much, Like, yeah, it's like, look, this is a job. It's an art form, but art, like I said in the beginning of this, is a perception. It's a mindset. It's an execution method.
So you know how to find your artistry within whatever you're doing.
Sure, because I've become a selfless servant. See, I think the problem is, are you artsy or are you an artist? If you're artsy, then you're all wrapped up in your own ideas. But if you're an artist and you're a commercial artist and you're actually going out with the intent to make sure your client is getting what they hired you for, then you're not thinking about what you want to do. You're thinking about what your talents are able to do for someone else.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And I think that there's nothing wrong with wanting to do your own thing. Just don't expect anyone to like it. And if they do, that's awesome. But you can't self-please with the expectations of some kind of outside acceptance.
Yeah.
That's just hypocritical. I knew, like I said, when Mike Barilli said that thing to me about where the scientist who's trying to explain our in-depth analysis to simple-minded people, it don't work.
Yeah.
And that's back to the Fear Factory thing. In 1993, what Candiria was working on was pretty innovative. Yeah. It was what yielded the Subliminal demo.
It's still innovative.
But it was not Fear Factory. Fear Factory, that first Fear Factory song that came out, I'm like still hearing it in my head. What, master, whatever, remember that lyric? I'm not getting it all out, but shit, dude, that's 1993.
Yeah.
It's 24 years ago, and I'm able to at least get it.
Well, they still have a career,
And they're still doing stuff too.
Yeah.
And they still have a longevity. They have a legend status.
Yeah.
They put themselves into the death metal scene. And not just that, dude. Look, I ain't afraid to say this, man. We're from New York, all right? Fear Factory's not. We're from New York. we had this selfish stigma about Roadrunner Records. There were a lot of artists in New York that were like the whole fuck Roadrunner thing.
Yeah, but VOD was Roadrunner, Madball was Roadrunner,
Listen,
Earth Crisis.
it's like the same thing Candiria did with Century Media, man.
Life of Agony,
we shouldn't have
Typo.
been fuck Roadrunner. We shouldn't have been fuck Monte
Biohazard.
Cana. We should have been like, yo, sign with that shit because they'll give us money and they'll put us on the fucking road, and we didn't.
By
you
the way,
know?
I just named like 6 New York Roadrunner bands.
I know, dude. That's what I'm saying, though, is like there was this stigma.
Did they want to
though.
sign you?
There was some minor interest from Monty and Mike Gitter. They were definitely feeling the vibes, but we had this animosity towards Roadrunner. I forgot all the details
Just like an
behind it.
elitist, like we're too, in our own realm for this.
I don't know if it was us thinking we're too good for them or us thinking that Roadrunner was an enslavement label.
Yeah. Well, I think back then though, they really did sign bands for like 8 records. And
Right,
shit like
that's
that.
what I'm saying. We had this like conception about them, like this idea, like this is not the label we want to be with. They just slave you in,
Yeah.
and we don't want to get locked in like that. We were still developing, and it's enticing when you're a young band.
Of course.
Now it's not the same, but back then it was like you'd do anything for a label to show any sign of interest.
Well, that
from
was,
you.
I think, and I've had lots of Roadrunner artists on this label. I've had Mike Gitter on this show, and that was a label at that time that really had power to do things for your career. But
They did, and I think we were foolish for not
Yeah.
taking them up. I think we could have gotten a deal and done something.
would have been interesting. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But all right, so you
Exactly.
have to go in a couple minutes. So I just want to. There's one more thing I want to know before you go.
Yeah.
And I think the listeners want to know.
Uh-huh.
Candiria has a new record
Yeah.
that you're not on.
Correct. Well, I'm on 2 songs. But I really wouldn't say I'm on those 2 songs either because the sound replacement and the gridding is so pathetic. Oh man,
All right.
it stinks to say things like that.
Yeah. So you were involved with the writing of this record to some degree, or no?
No.
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 Then why did you play a
Well,
drum-
with Broken Bones, the music is pretty much close. It's pretty much the same as what it was when we wrote it. But the song that they call "One of You Will Betray Me" is a song that I wrote. I wrote the entire song, all the guitar parts and everything, and it's not there now.
They
My song is
changed it.
gone. They wrote a completely new song over my drums.
Yeah.
And all the other songs are their songs. The songs we were working on before the Metal Blade signing were different songs as well. So none of the songs you hear on the album are even song starters that we were working on as a band.
Yeah.
before that.
So you were part of the process at the beginning, but through the
Sure.
evolution of it, very little of Ken Schalk.
Well, now going back to the Joe Holmes conversation, in transition from the Pharmacos project to what Joe Holmes is working on now, his singer Robbie lives on the East Coast in the South. And the experience that is happening with Robbie is the same frustrating experience that was taking place with me and Candiria, is that when you're a band and you want to create within your local environment, that means everybody who's in the band has to be local.
Yeah.
I think the most intense reason why it just couldn't work out between Candiria and I in this next stage of their career is that.
It's just
Because
if-
I am in LA,
Yeah.
I have a family, and they can't provide a career salary for me to
Of
move
course.
to New York.
Yeah.
I love my mom and dad. I love my brother and his wife and child, and it would be nice to be with family on a regular basis, but I don't live in New York anymore.
Yeah.
And back in the summer of 2015, when they were contemplating the whole how do we do this aspect of recording an album, they were proposing to me ideas like, come to New York for a few weeks and we'll work on the music, and then you'll come back for a few weeks again. And I'm just like, guys, are you crazy? Just for a few weeks, sure, just like that? That's just not going to happen.
Not with your family situation.
Yeah, because then you weigh in so many variables. It's like, don't you realize how much money has to be made in 3 weeks, 4 weeks time? You can't pay me that.
I could do
and
that.
And I wasn't telling them in a way like, you must pay me.
Yeah.
It was like, look, we're not in that position.
You're just being reasonable.
Yeah,
You're
I
being
was like, this
realistic.
is not going to happen. So then the next attempt was, what if You guys worked on the music, and then, hey, look, I'll come in as the professional I am. I'll spend 2 weeks in New York, and we'll bang out drum tracks for 2 weeks. It's not something I can't do. But they didn't want that. They wanted to develop songs.
Yeah.
And really have a drummer along the ride with them. And, Danny had already been working with them for all the other stuff,
So have you listened to the new Candiria record?
I have, yeah.
And what do you like it? Do you not like it? I mean,
you're going to ask me questions like that?
Yeah.
You want the truth?
If you want to tell me.
I think that Carly is the big progression of the album, and without trying to get too long-winded on this, I could go back to conversations before there was a Mike and a John in the band, where we always either teased or hinted to Carly that eventually you're going to sing again. Carly sang before Candiria.
Yeah.
So it was only a matter of time before he'd sing again.
Yo, Ken, I need to tell you something. He black. All black people sing. All right.
Bro, these are things I know. I grew up on black music, bro. You kidding me?
I know you're like I said,
Earth, Wind, and Fire is and it's not just Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, I grew up. This isn't some like, hey, black people, I'm cool. Be cool with me.
Yeah.
It ain't that Gary. What was his name? Larry.
What?
Larry. Fuck. Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh.
Remember?
Yeah.
Hey, we coup de la, right? I thought we were coup de la. That fucking one.
You got some long balls, Larry.
But the thing is, it's look, the exposure I had growing up was very soulful, very Motown driven.
Yeah.
I grew up on that. But
I'm gonna kind of real quick on you.
Yeah.
So my dad, white man, who kind of imbued himself in black culture without appropriating it, and by that, and I think that's a difficult thing for people to kind of understand, because they think because you like a certain music or a certain history, I think that's the other thing is the kind of the historical injustice element and putting yourself in that on a real level. My father's an educator. He studied. He
you
went
told
to
me
school
that.
Yeah. And jazz musician.
Here's two things that.
No, but I'm saying, but you're very much similar to that, with someone who identifies with black culture and black art in a way that I don't think most people do not have the depth of understanding and nuance to understand what that is.
Well, let me just say these two things. I had two very profound experiences in my life that led me to, I guess, at least self-believe inside me that my spirit is cultured in a worldly sense, rhythmically. And so this one time I was coming home from work in the city, and I used to like walking over the Brooklyn Bridge. I worked near Lower Manhattan, so walking over the bridge was no hassle. And I walked so far, all the way down to Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. And as I'm walking up Atlantic Avenue, there's this small little African shop. And I walk inside, and they got some djembe drums in there. And I get down with 3 other brothers in this shop. And we do this 4-man djembe drum jam for about 20 minutes. And the camaraderie and the rhythmic transcendence that took place in there was of that type of tribal nature. It's not about being African. It's about being earthly. It's about knowing that your human existence is thousands upon thousands of years old. It's not yesterday and today. It's thousands of years old. It's millennia. And when you can touch base with that in what you do, you can do things that you don't even know you have the ability to do.
Yeah.
So that happened, and then jamming with this African guitarist. We were just jamming, and at the end of the jam, he looked at me. He goes, "Brother, you're African." He said that to me, and I laughed. But
technically, we're all Africans.
As humble as I could be in my own way, I accepted that as like him saying that, back to that millennial thing. You're not a present human being. You exist with the thousands of years of culture that exists within us. You don't try to just grab from the now. You exist in the now through thousands of years of prior existence. You encompass it all. That's what I looked at his remark as.
So
Not as like, hey, look, you should be black. You know, it wasn't about that. You should be African. It was like what he was saying was like, bro, you're in touch with the transcendence of life energy.
So my father, my Caucasian, Irish, Polish father,
was in touch with the transcendence of life energy.
He would literally say this about Corey. Like, if God forbid had like a subpar show, he said this. He was like, yeah, Corey, our black drummer. This is my white father said, man, he was just sounding white today.
Corey sounds white at times. Corey, I love you. Corey, you're an amazing drummer. I always love watching you play. But I think that your drumming was a little more Fate's Warning than it was James Brown. I would say that.
Those fighting words.
Don't beat me up, Corey. You beef. You got some bulk in you, man. Don't sit on me.
All right.
Don't Kung Fu Panda my ass.
Honestly, I think that's a good time to wrap it, man. We're gonna have Corey on here, and
Corey is the bomb.
He can retort you. I was supposed to have him when I was in New York.
Corey was the one who called me out on my fake ghost notes.
You had fake ghost notes?
Well, he was like, he goes, I think you're doing a lot of them ghost notes just to fill up the space, just to get to your next snare drum hit. I don't think you really mean to hit those ghost notes. And I said to him, I said, Corey, I think you're kind of right in that respect. I was like, certain times I'm ghosting for the sake of like bringing the flavor, but other times it's happening more subconsciously because I don't want to sit there all white and wait.
Yeah.
You know? Not to be all black and white, but it's like groove drummers, they want to finesse that snare drum hand. That's the jazz.
That's also
like that
the
snare
human.
Riding underneath. It's the pulse underneath.
I love it.
The big hits, yeah.
All right, so we got some motherfucker who is definitely sounding white in the background.
Yo, the room next door is white.
And white people listening to this, please take no offense. This is all in jest. But yo, I love you, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Dude, I love you too, man. RNG, we got to do one again.
We're going to do it.
Yeah, podcast 217.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.